No, it's a great start. I would pose to Doug, though, you've done this, right? So Chick-fil-A has already adopted 842 early as of 2021. So any insight from you as someone who has actually been responsible for this?
Well, as I was listening to Cheryl talk, I felt really good about our adoption because I think we may have done each of those things that you talked about. No, a couple things so I think one, Cheryl covered everything really, really well. And I think a lot of the advice she gave is really sound. Maybe a couple things that I would emphasize. When Cheryl talked about going to the departments, I think a reality is that in Chick-fil-A, it's no different than a lot of companies. Procurement is spread across the business. I can't tell you the number of forklift leases we found in the desk drawer of our design and construction team. And we're like, and they're like, no, we're not leasing it, we're renting it. And I'm like, please explain to me what the difference is. And they're like, oh, well, a rental is where you just make monthly payments, but a lease is where you have a bargain for like $1 purchase option. I'm like, well, actually, those are all leases, but we'll get to that. And so I just think there is a business sort of misunderstanding of that. And so we found a really effective approach where we actually created a document. And it was sort of like our charter, if you will, of what is a lease. A lease doesn't necessarily say a lease at the top. And it's a lot of the things that Cheryl was talking about, does it involve the use of a piece of, we try to use property, plant, equipment, fixed asset, let's not even use those terms. Let's boilerplate it down to what the business is going to understand. And I think this is just a really important exercise. And we did a pretty full stop exercise of going across the business. Obviously, we focused in areas where, corporate services does a lot of the copiers and a lot of the sort of ancillary equipment. And then, thinking about furniture and fixtures that we have in our corporate office space. We do have a heavy real estate lease portfolio, as Cheryl also mentioned, because of the lease administration tools we had in place. We were at a good starting point from having these documents, but covering the basis on both equipment equipment leases as well as embedded leases. So I thought that one was very tough. I think that's an exercise that most companies should be going through. And certainly we created a tracking document that showed when the meetings were held and notes that we had, so that when our external auditors came back and said, what discussions did you have? We had a document to go back to, we had the meeting on this date, here's who we talked to, and here's what we found, and here's how we evaluated it. So the documentation piece, even as a private company, is really important. And maybe the last thing that I would use to wrap up is if you start thinking about embedded leases aren't new, by the way. Embedded leases, the concept existed under 840. It was really 842 that brought it to light, and it's because now leases go on the balance sheet. Whereas before, if you had an embedded lease and you weren't accounting for it, chances are it'd be an operating lease and it wouldn't be on your balance sheet. And if there wasn't a minimum payment, you wouldn't even have a straight line. So really, it's just, is it rent expense or is it some other form of SG&A, right? Well, now it goes on the balance sheet. The exposure to your financial statements is higher. So you need to have a better proactive approach. Yes, doing this little interview process that we talked about is really helpful to find a starting point. But going forward, what is your process for figuring out whether you have leases? And I think there's a lot of tools out there. We're actually looking internally at a contract lifecycle management tool that our corporate legal department is leading. But think about TurboTax. You guys do your taxes. It's did you get married this year? Did you buy a house this year? Yes. And it points you in the direction you should file a married filing joint return. Think about that, but with a procurement lifecycle management tool that says, as an accounting team, I can say, well, hey, the first question I want is, does this involve the use of an asset? Yes or no, define an asset. And so you can start gearing questions in your procurement and contract management tools. I think it's really important, especially for companies that have heavy service agreements, to think about what are the proactive solutions and tools that you have to identify leases, because you don't really want to end up in a scenario where every year you're having to go do this full interview process. Hey, I know we talked last year. Did you do any contracts this year? Did it have an asset? Is it a lease? Is it a rental? Do you know what are the So you don't want to have to do that. You want to find proactive solutions. So I think there are some effective tools out there that can help with that.
So I will say, LeaseQuery has a tool. 100%. Imagine that. We have a tool that literally goes through this. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. It literally goes through this process. Is it an asset? Do you have control? We answer these questions for you. If you need a guide to use, you can literally use LeaseQuery's tool. It's under the free tools section. So thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add, for CPE purposes, that was not a sales pitch, that it's just simply a fact that doesn't exist on our website.